Good evening, everybody, and I see plenty of students in the room from Mr. Smith's and Ms. Olson's class, so welcome, everybody. I hope that gets you an extra grade point. The regular meeting of the Independent School District 279 School Board is called to order at 6:04 p.m. on Tuesday, February 18th, 2020. Seated in front of you this evening from my left to your right are Director Jessica Craig, Director Kelsey Dawson Walton, Director Tanya Simons, myself, Mike Ostafi, Director Jackie Mosqueda-Jones, Director Heather Douglas, and Superintendent Corey McIntyre. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Director Dawson Walton, can you lead us tonight?
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Board members, in front of you is the agenda for this evening. Are there any other additions or changes to tonight's agenda? Is there a motion to accept the agenda as is?
So moved.
We have a motion to accept as is. Is there a motion, or is there a second?
Second.
There is a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor of accepting the agenda as printed, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 6-0, and the agenda is adopted. The next agenda item is audience opportunity to address the school board. We have a couple cards tonight. I'm going to read our standard message for speakers. During audience opportunity to address the school board, I will call on each speaker who has submitted a speaker card. We ask that speakers keep their comments to 3 minutes. The board does not take action or discuss matters during this portion of the meeting. Speakers may be referred to the superintendent or staff if follow-up is necessary. The complete guidelines for public participation are provided on the meeting materials table and on the school board section of the district website. When I call your name, please come to the microphone and state your topic and also whether or not you are a district resident. With that, I know we have a couple students from Osseo Senior High this evening. Natalie Kinches-Adave, I believe that's close. So if we can just have all the students come up and we'll start from there. So Natalie? And please introduce yourselves when you each speak. Thank you.
You can do it.
And they're here with the support of newly minted Minnesota State Principal of the Year, Michael Lehan. So.
Thank you, Chair Ostafi. That was certainly not part of the presentation this evening. Chair Ostafi, board member, Superintendent McIntyre, first and foremost, thank you for this opportunity. I'm here because my scholars asked me to introduce them to each of you as they would like to share a little bit about BPA this evening, Business Professionals of America. This is in its second year here at Osseo Senior High School. 12 scholars made it to state this year. Up from 8 last year, and now we're looking to make it to national. So they'd like to share just a little bit more about BPA and how that's going at Osseo Senior High School.
My name is Natalie Tinsehoff. My name is Natalie Tinsehoff.
My name is Kindness Ativier, and I'm Secretary of BPA.
My name is Samba Bhattarai, and I'm the president of BPA. Business Professionals of America helps students discover their passion and help them grow leadership skills. BPA wants the members to gain opportunity in professionalism and service growth.
So, again, I'm the secretary, and one reason why I joined BPA is because it was recommended to me by my financial business teacher at school. And originally, I had no clue about the club at all. I'd heard about it prior, but regarding what we actually did, I was clueless. But when I started doing it, I found a newfound joy for it, got to participate, and really build my business credentials.
Hello, I am a foreign exchange student from the Netherlands, and I heard about BPA because my business teacher told me about it, and I thought this would be a good opportunity for me to meet new people and learn more about the business industry.
I was in class one day and my business teacher introduced me to Business Professionals of America, and she told me all the opportunities I could have by joining this club. And it really blew a spark in my mind to run for president this year. And last year I was just a member. I didn't really know what was going on around BPA. And this year I ran for president, and I'm starting to understand more about BPA and how it affects our community.
So what does BPA look like at Osseo Senior High? So students get to practice in business fields for competitive events at the regional, state, and national level. We also get to interact with different student organizations. In November, we collaborated with the Rotary Club of Maple Grove, and we've also collaborated with our PIPD club at our high school. We also like to fundraise and interact with the community that way, and we also like to attend business presentations, whether it be from far away or locally, and we also like to volunteer our time in the community.
With Business Professionals of America, we do a lot of volunteering. The main charity we volunteer for is the Special Olympics, and we are also planning to walk for the juvenile diabetes in downtown Minneapolis at the Mall of America. And we will be volunteering at Feed My
The playing time.
Yeah. Feed My Starving Children. We have close to 21 members. We are a part of Region 4, and other schools that are competing with us are Anoka, Blaine, St. Michael Albertville, and Champlain Park, to name a few. In the pictures, you see us at an award ceremony where many of our members qualified for state, which would be on March 5th through 7th
Please continue.
in downtown Minneapolis.
So the students in BPA are ongoing business professionals. We're looking for future entrepreneurs. We want to help them build their technical skills and their relationships with business professionals around our community. We want to expand their knowledge in business fields too.
One reason why we're in attendance today is because we'd like to observe a school board meeting and be active participants inside of our community.
We want to promote BPA to members in our community and staff members around our district.
We'd also like to share BPA's impact with the community. Oftentimes, clubs are just isolated in their own individual schools, so by sharing it out with the school board and other members and students, we feel as if we can expand our knowledge and help out.
In celebration of the CTE month on February, which stands for Academical Knowledge and Technical Occupation, we'd like to promote that towards students and helping them gain their pathway to post-secondary education.
And finally, we'd like to practice professionalism in a real-life setting, working on our speaking skills and our collaboration skills. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next up is Caitlin Hathaway to discuss technology. Ms. Hathaway.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Hathaway, and I'm here to talk about technology. As a student, I am concerned about the use of technology in our schools, and these are the things that I'm concerned about. School-issued devices are a tool for learning that can be used for many educational uses, but they can also pose a risk for our learning. Using Chromebooks at the high school is great for doing digital homework, but the added screen time to our lives is not good for our health. Students do use technology enough in their lives, which is a problem for society today, and adding that extra technology isn't really good for us, but it's what we're stuck with, and most of our teachers incorporate it in their daily teaching lifestyles. On top of that, recently we've had our snow day, and flex learning is kind of iffy. And I'm sure you guys know that some of the schools are struggling with this. The teachers don't like it. The students, we don't like it. We want our snow days. And the technology it allows you to let us work on things instead of having to add time at the end of the year, which is great. But it also means that kids who don't have access to the internet have to work on things that they missed during the school when they get back. So then they get back and they get all the things that they missed, and then that adds on to their regular workload for the week, and they only have that next week to get everything in. And that adds that extra stress where if they just had access to the Wi-Fi, it wouldn't have been a problem. Where if this Chromebook thing hadn't been put in the first place, they wouldn't have had that stress. And I'm sure you guys, so students, when you're working on a paper and you're up late working on this, maybe you procrastinated, whatever, so you're up late working on this, and now you're staring at a screen because it has to be submitted by 11:59 before midnight to your online Schoology assignment. And so now you're up late, and then all of a sudden the due light's passed, and so you're hurrying and you're trying to get it in, and now you're up till 1 a.m. working on this, and you have to email your teacher like, I'm sorry, I worked on this so hard, but now you've wasted 4 hours of your life staring at a screen trying to work on this paper when you could have been writing it down.
30 seconds remaining.
The more we add technology to the younger students, it keeps getting added to more and more of the younger grades, and now they're having this technology incorporated into their lives from younger ages, on top of whatever technology their parents are introducing into their lives. And so now they're learning on a screen instead of in paper, in books, and it adds life skills for as society evolves, but think about how technology can influence students' lives when they're younger and when they're at home looking at a screen. And if they don't have the access to it in the first place, it can cause that little bit of hurt.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hathaway. Okay, next up on the agenda is the Superintendent's Report. Mr. McIntyre.
Thank you, Chair Ostafi. So a regular part of the Superintendent's Report is to share our points of pride in the district. Points of pride celebrate students, staff, and community members who are contributing to the accomplishment of our mission, which is to inspire and prepare all students with the confidence, courage, and competence to achieve their dreams, contribute to community, and engage in a lifetime of learning. So I've asked cabinet members to share with you some recent points of pride in our district.
In the category of achieving dreams, senior high students from Maple Grove, Osseo, and Park Center earned more than 100 awards from the 2020 Minnesota Scholastic Arts Awards program, which recognized outstanding student artists and provides scholarship opportunities for seniors. 19 students received Gold Key Awards. Their artwork is on display through Saturday at the University of Minnesota's Regis West Gallery. Osseo Senior High's Miles Hawthorne was featured as a CCX News Standout student on February 12th. Osseo staff lauded Hawthorne not only for his impressive talents in the classroom and on the football field, but also for the strength of his character and ability to serve as a role model. Hawthorne will attend Winona State University next year to study computer science and play on the school's Division II football team. For the second consecutive year, Sahana Vandayar, a senior at Maple Grove Senior High, was honored by the National Center for Women and Information Technology for her technology and leadership skills and experiences. Vandayar was named a National Honorable Mention recipient by the organization, one of only 360 students across the U.S. to receive this honor.
It's been a busy winter for high school athletics in Osseo area schools. Here are a few highlights. The Osseo Senior High girls and boys weightlifting team placed first and second, respectively, at the 2020 Minnesota State High School Powerlifting Championship. Kirby Gilbertson, a member of the district's PI adapted floor hockey team, notched his 100th career goal during a 14-0 win over Mounds View last month. The Maple Grove Senior High dance team placed third at the state tournament in the Class AAA jazz competition. Park Center Senior High gymnast Annika Lee won a Section 5AA all-round vault, balance beam, and floor exercise titles on February 13th. She will compete in the state tournament along with Maple Grove's Nadia Abid and Sasha Thompson. The Maple Grove Senior High's girls hockey team won the section championship on February 14th and will begin state tournament play on February 20th. The Park Center Senior High competitive cheerleading squad performed at a national event in Orlando. The Maple Grove Senior High competition team won the state title and placed 9th at nationals.
Our next category is contributing to community. The Student Council at Brooklyn Middle Steam School has been busy giving back to the community this winter. In December, the Student Council sponsored a food drive that yielded 2,750 pounds of food for community partner SEEP. Then, in late January, Student Council members participated in a service learning project at Haven Housing, a North Minneapolis-based nonprofit that provides transitional services, resources, and support for women and children experiencing homelessness. In lifelong learning, to celebrate Black History Month, students at Park Center Senior High watched a live performance of The Meeting, a play about an imaginary 1965 meeting between Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. At Osseo Senior High, the scholar-driven Osseo Speaks event featured performances by students, staff, and guest artists centered around celebrating Black culture, innovators, and contributors in history.
Finally, under the category of mission-driven employees, Osseo Senior High School Principal Michael Lehan has been named the 2020 Minnesota High School Principal of the Year by the Minnesota Association of Secondary School Principals. He is now eligible to be selected to represent Minnesota in the National Principal of the Year contest. And then finally, Tom Trutnow, a fourth grade teacher at Elm Creek Elementary, was named KS95's Teacher of the Week in late January. The parent who nominated Trutnow for his award noted that he's been exceptional this school year and praised his unwavering support that he provides to scholars. You can read more points of pride on our website at district279.org.
Thank you. So in addition to our points of pride, I just have two additional items for you tonight. First, I wanted to just update everyone on the work we've been doing regarding our strategic planning process. As many of our staff, family, and community members know, we are engaged in a new strategic planning process facilitated by the consulting firm of TeamWorks International. Our work will result in a strategic roadmap that describes work to be done over the next 3 to 5 years and identifies our priorities and what we want to achieve as a school district. Student, family, and staff voice is an important part of this work. So this year's process includes more front-end stakeholder engagement than we've done in many years. These sessions are facilitated by Christine Robluski from TeamWorks International and Paula Forbes from Forbes Solutions. 20 student, staff, and family stakeholder sessions involving approximately 500 individual participants have been organized to gather input about the desired daily experiences in our schools for each of the stakeholder groups. These groups were specifically designed to ensure that the perspectives gathered are overall reflective and representative of our student demographics, our various employee groups, and the families we serve, including racial, ethnic, and language diversity. Designated sessions offer translated materials and interpreters. We'll have to reschedule 2 of the staff and student sessions that were affected by last week's weather-related cancellation. TeamWorks is helping our system prepare for change. In January, we had a session facilitated by TeamWorks leading teachers, administrators, and others in engaging in understanding and honoring our past and identifying critical events and trends that have led us to where we are today. Actually today, this afternoon, the same group of teachers, administrators, and other staff conducted an environmental scan, creating a baseline for what is well established in our district, what is ebbing, what is emerging, and what is on the edge of consideration and development. These context-setting sessions allow us to recognize what has been encouraged and discouraged over time and help us identify areas of strength along with areas for improvement. As I noted earlier, we're doing more stakeholder engagement on the front end, the input side, than we have in recent past. I've heard from a few people who are wondering when they'll be able to provide feedback on the work to date. So I wanted to share some information about when we'll move to that next feedback stage. So feedback opportunities will be offered in multiple ways and in multiple languages. This spring, we will seek broad feedback on the themes we heard from stakeholder group sessions regarding the desired daily experiences of our students, families, and staff. In late summer or early fall, depending on the calendar and how quickly we move, we'll seek feedback on our draft strategic roadmap, which will include the draft mission, vision, values, and strategic directions. That strategic map feedback window will continue following that effort. The final strategic roadmap will be adopted by the board sometime in late summer, early fall, depending again how quickly we can move. So the strategic planning section of the district website includes an overall view of the process that I just described, and as we pass milestones along the way, we'll continue to update the website with new information moving forward. Secondly, this week is School Board Recognition Week, and I want to take a moment to recognize the important work of our own school board. The key work of the board, as many of you know, is to improve student achievement and increase community engagement to promote education. In order to accomplish this, the school board sets vision for the school district, determines strategies to accomplish goals, and our board sets in place a system of accountability to monitor our progress on those goals. The board serves in an advocacy function, building community and staff support for those goals, creating conditions under which for almost 21,000 students to achieve performance standards is no small task. Add to that the responsibility for pre-K and our adult learners. It's easy to see the importance of our school board service. I do think that our public understands that school board members have a tremendous impact on our children's future and the quality of life in our communities. I'm not always sure, though, that community members and others understand the demands of our school board service. Our board members spend countless hours preparing for and participating in regular meetings and work sessions and attending numerous school and district and community events. School board members also devote a tremendous amount of time to studying educational issues and laws and listening to the interests of our parents and staff in our communities. I don't think anyone will never really completely understand that, and I don't think you're ever completely off the job. So in recognition, you're receiving a packet of handmade cards made by our students in our community-based vocational assessment and training program. I want to personally thank you, and on behalf of our leadership team, thank you for your service to the students and families in our communities in our district. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
With
Superintendent McIntyre.
that concludes my report for tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Our next agenda item is school board reports, and we'll start to my left. Director Craig, do you have a committee report or update?
Not tonight.
Okay, Director Dawson Walton.
I have a couple. One, we had the legislative session preview maybe a week and a half ago, the Association of Metropolitan School Districts. So we were talking about this session, and we heard from our Commissioner, Department of Education, and different legislators throughout the state, and really talked about the focus this year is around mental health, social emotional learning, ending discipline disparities that are predictable by race, and overall racial disparities in our education system. So this will be exciting, I think, couple months as we embark on the session. I also wanted to mention that many of us attended the 279, I sit on the foundation, 279 Foundation and board, and we had a really successful, fun game night out gala. So if you didn't go this year, you should go next year for sure. And we have some events coming up. I can't remember when they are. The 5K is coming up in the summer and stuff. So we'll keep people up to date. We had a listening session last week, which was really successful. It was at Park Center High School with our community. It was a pretty packed room full of ideas and excitement. And I think it got us all really fired up and excited for our strategic plan. The next one is our final one for the year of the 4, is April 14th at Osseo Area Learning Center before our work session at 5:15.
All right, thank you very much. Director Simons.
No reports this time.
Okay, Director Mosqueda Jones.
Kelsey took my thunder.
All right.
All good.
Director Douglas.
I do. I attended my 287 board meeting last week, and the exciting part was that our Share the Spotlight event, where we hear from students, was an Osseo student. So that was really exciting to get to hear from Maybelline Garcia, who is an Osseo student participating in the Gateway program. And what she talked about was really sobering and kind of painful. But she shared her presentation about tragedy that children experience and how it impacts their education, and specifically talking about children who are in camps right now, ones down at the border and globally. And so that was definitely hard to listen to, but also really inspiring and quite impressive. The way that she spoke and articulated what she had to say was really, really incredible. And she also had a video, which I will share with other board members and anyone else who wants to see it, because she did participate in a government oppression symposium that was recorded. So it was very, very powerful. We also talked about administrative changes, and the board approved a Director of Equity Inclusion position, which is elevating our equity work at 287. I don't know how much you guys know, but the majority of our students that are served by 287 are students of color, and a huge portion of these students are Black males. And right now, really sobering fact is that the pipeline to prison for these level 4 or setting 4 students who are Black males is really high, and it's not okay. And so we need to make really active change, and so we decided that we needed to elevate our equity work to be a direct report to our superintendent at 287. And so I'm really excited for the work that we have coming there. And we also received a $8,000 donation from the Philando Castile Foundation through his mother to pay off student lunch debt. So that was very exciting. And then we also discussed our legislative platform, which is very similar to our own legislative platform. And that's about it. So it was kind of a tough meeting, but all very important and critical things that we need to talk about and deal with right away. So that's all I have.
Thank you very much, Director Douglas. Our first presentation this evening is the 2020 Census Data. And Director Dawson Walton, will you please provide an introduction to our presenter?
I'd be happy to. I'm so excited. So Dr. Susan Brower is here to discuss the Minnesota Census. She's been the state demographer since 2012. And so at the state demographer's office, they go around the state really talking about new social and economic trends based on our changing demographics. And a lot of that information we see in many of our reports and many of the data, the data that we see, it's from immigration to health to workforce and education. And so one of the other functions under Dr. Brower is the 2020 census and providing leadership throughout the state, the whole entire state of Minnesota to that. So that's why she's here today. And we also have a resolution to support the census coming up. So.
Good evening. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what the census is, why it's important, and how schools can get involved. And I'm happy to take questions about anything you think of. The census is coming up April 1st, 2020. It is taken every 10 years. It is a complete count of everyone in the U.S. Every living, breathing human being is counted. And we will get our first invitation to respond to the census starting in about a month. On March 12th is when the first mailings go out to homes. People will receive an invitation to go online and fill out the census form online for the first time. If they don't fill it out right away, they'll get a reminder letter to do it, and a second reminder letter in late March and early April. April 1st is Census Day, as I said. That's the day that we're counting all around and focusing on. If they still don't fill out their form after receiving 3 mailings, they'll get a third letter, and they will also get a paper questionnaire. So everyone will have the opportunity to fill it out online. and everyone can fill it out by paper. If they wait a few mailings in, they'll eventually get paper if that's their preference. You can also fill out the form this time by telephone. So electronically online, by paper, or by phone, it's your choice, however you want to fill it out. A final reminder will come in late April, and then after that, if someone still doesn't fill out their form, if a household doesn't fill out their form, that's when census takers go to doors and invite people to respond in person. So if someone fills out their form either online, by paper, or by phone, they should never see a census worker at their door. That is only for households that do not respond to this series of mailings. This census is going to be tough. It's not easy to take a census ever, I don't think. But this one in particular is going to be a challenge for a number of reasons. This census will take place within the context of these bubbles that you see here up on the slide. Some of these things are ongoing issues that have kind of continued to evolve into this decade. We have informal, complex living situations. We have people who are highly mobile, who may be moving from household to household, or maybe children moving between households with parents. We have an increasingly diverse population, many of whom have language barriers or maybe don't have the historical experience of what the census means or what it's about. We have declining response rates to surveys. No one's real excited to fill out a survey in general, and they don't necessarily have a reference. Folks don't necessarily have a reference for what the census is and why it's important. So we're trying to do a lot of that work on the front end to be sure that when they get that first mailing, they know what it is and they know why it's important to answer it. I will say that of all these bubbles here, the one that probably worries me the most is the increasing distrust in government. Because this form is coming from the federal government at a time where we've seen increasingly that people are distrustful or even fearful of their government, I think this is a real concern that is just part of the context in which this current census will be taken. And I think I'll speak a little bit more to this in a moment, but one of the only things that we can do to combat that distrust and that fear is to have face-to-face conversations and have people who are trusted in the community carry the message that this is an important thing to do for the community. It's not just something that we do for the federal government, it's what we do for ourselves. The reason why we take a census, I'm looking toward the students, do you know? The reason why we take a census, the first reason, it's in the Constitution, and it's the way that we make equal representation work. We don't know how to have equal representation if we don't know where people are living, so we can't draw the boundaries equally without that head count every 10 years. And so that's its first purpose. We also distribute all kinds of funds based on the decennial census, and we use the data to make smart decisions. I'm sure many of you here are using census data, whether or not you know it, when you're making decisions about schools and looking at attendance and looking at what it will look like in the future, what school needs will be in the future, that in part census data informs those decisions. So let me talk through a couple of those. First, the political representation. We're very, very close to potentially losing a congressional district this time around, and we were very close in 2010. We're in the same position this time. We kept our seat in 2010 after the last census by just 8,700 people. So we barely held on to it. Minnesota received the very last U.S. Congressional House of Representatives seat that there was to give. And here we are again, very, very close. The estimate right now is that we will lose that seat between 7,000 and 22,000. That's a number that can very easily be overcome with a solid census count. And we've got folks who are not only in government like me talking about the census and working on it, but we have folks who are out in the community, who are advocates in nonprofit organizations and just neighborhood groups who are energized and excited to make sure that we get this count right. The census also is the basis for the distribution of all kinds of funds. At the federal level, there's been a study recently that looks at state by state how much money is distributed on the basis of the census count. And for Minnesota, our number is $15 billion per year is distributed from the federal government to Minnesota and its communities. That works out to be about $2,800 per person per year, or $28,000 over the course of the decade. So we're talking about a tremendous amount of money. This is tax dollars that we send off to Washington that we get back through, in part, through a census count, a good census count. It's the way that we determine where need is and which communities are in need of the funds that are collected. I'll say that at the state level, this is also true. Census data are also used to distribute state funds. One of the areas that I'm familiar with in particular is community education funding. It's very directly tied to the number of people who are in your district. So to the extent that you get a good count in your district, that number carries through to the funding formulas that you see and you work with over the next decade. We've got this one chance to get this count right now, and that number, whatever we get on April 1st or around that time, is going to stick with us for the next 10 years. So a good count will have benefits into 2030, up until 2030. That same study that I mentioned out of George Washington University looks specifically at a few programs that are funded through the school, or when students are within school, and you can see these are very large numbers. These are annual numbers. $165 million to the National School Lunch Program. This is again the statewide, the Minnesota number. $158 million to Title I grants. $196 million. All of these are programs that take place within the school or touch the school population or students while they're in schools. You're not supposed to be able to read this, but just so you know, there are many, many other programs across the board that touch students and families in many different ways that are outside of the school programs that we just looked at, but they really impact learning, as you well know. So those programs that strengthen families' economic stability are among those that are that census dollars are used to fund. Again, we've got we take this count once, and it's here with us for the next 10 years. There are fears by some, and with good reason, that the census may not be safe, and so I just want to share with you that there are laws in place specifically to protect the data that are collected by the Census Bureau. These are laws only for the census data, not across the federal government or across state government. And there are no other agencies that can have access to the data that are collected by the Census Bureau according to Title 13 of the Federal Code. That includes the IRS, it includes the FBI, welfare, immigration. All of these different federal agencies may not have access to these data. At the individual level, they're only released in the aggregate, like in the neighborhood level, except for 72 years after they're collected. 72 years was the lifespan at the time that the law was written, and so they figured at that point it was part of the historical record. But the point is that they stay under lock and key, and that Census Bureau employees take this very seriously, that these data are well protected. Historically, the census has missed certain groups. We can look back at past censuses and past surveys and know that there are some groups that are more likely to be missed than others, and young children are among those who are likely to be missed. Looking back at the research around why young children are missed, they tend to be missed in households where a form is filled out, but they happen to be left off the form. And oftentimes that happens in complex households. So whether it's a child living with a grandparent or a child living with an aunt and an uncle and a cousin-in-law or something, these are the kinds of houses where the children tend to be missed. We can also look geographically at areas that are likely to have a greater undercount or a lower self-response rate. I'm showing you just the area around here to show that we can pinpoint pretty specifically which areas those are that are likely to be underrepresented in the census, at least initially. And so there are things that we can do to specifically reach out and engage groups that are likely to be missed. So at the state level, what we've done is really tried to boost the ability of trusted voices, of messengers, to tell the story of why this is important so that people hear it from people that they're already trusting. And so that's what I am encouraging you all to do through your schools, because you all have the trust of your students already. Your families know your principals. They know your teachers. If they hear the message that this is an important thing to do and a good thing to do in the community, it's going to carry a whole lot more weight than if I tell them or someone else that they don't know. And so there are really specific things that the school district can do. You can send home information in backpacks. You can send emails, texts, or robocall families to let them know you should look and you should go and fill out the census form. And you can also host mobile response tables right in your schools and have people fill them out there. I would just encourage you to think about the ways that you can make face-to-face and direct contact around this with people who are already trusted, because the families within this school district are really going to be an important piece of how successful this census is for Minnesota in 2020. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions if you have any.
Directors, any questions?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Director Craig.
I have a question about timeline. So in the past, in 2010, the results were released to the state in, I believe, early 2011. Is it kind of a year-long process then, this time around?
Mr. Chair, yes.
Okay.
The first data that we'll get back from the census will be December, and that's just the state level number that tells us whether or not we kept that 8th congressional district. So
Okay.
December of 2020 of this year, we get our state totals, and then by April 2021, we get the block level data that allows people to do redistricting.
Okay, and then for local municipal governments, when will they receive the data?
So they can also receive the data at the same time if they're interested in the block data. So that is just that very basic information at a low level of geography that they can use to form their political districts. And then what happens over the next course of the year after that on a rolling basis is more kind of demographic profiles of different areas that are tabulated.
Okay,
for
thank you.
certain levels. Yeah.
Thank you.
Not
Any
a
other
question,
questions?
But a comment that we had spoken at our last work session about the different opportunities that our district would take advantage of to continue sharing out census information. I know we've had a mailing, it was included in one of our mailing newsletters. So we talked about a variety of mechanisms that we can do to support that.
Wonderful. I just made the suggestions, but you all know your families best.
Yeah, I think that mailing hit today or yesterday, or at least
Beautiful.
one of them did, so.
Wonderful.
um,
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, comments, directors?
I'd just like to say thank you, Dr. Brower, for the information, especially for the specific actions people can take in participating. And
you.
and kind of just providing this in a very clear, understandable way to understand the census. I know there's been a number of changes, so this is very helpful for our communities to understand the process and for us as our school district and others, how to participate in it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would like to add that I think just for all the reasons here, it's so important, and it touches the information and the data we have from the census just impacts our district or schools so much. And I just think I think that as a district, we need to, take a leadership role and really be able to promote it in our buildings. Like, as you said, they're trusted places and faces, and I think it's really important. So thank you for coming out.
Thank you. I can say, if I can add, just that I think for some families, the schools are really the only trusted institution that they will hear this from, and so it really is an important role.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Kelsey, for inviting Dr. Bauer. Our next presentation this evening is our English Learner Services, led by Interim Assistant Superintendent Patrick Smith and Kirsten Nicholson, Coordinator, English Learner Program.
All right. Well, good evening, Chair Staffy, school board members, Superintendent McIntyre, and cabinet members. The outcome of our presentation this evening is to increase consciousness and strengthen understanding regarding our English learner programming in our school district. We previously shared information via Superintendent McIntyre in response to questions at a listening session in November regarding EL program entrance and exit criteria. That information is shared with you again as Appendix A in your packet. We are providing some additional information this evening about the students we serve, our language instruction, educational program, and connections to our priority work to support language learner success. I would like to now turn it over to Kirsten Nicholson, who serves as our English Learner Program Coordinator, to lead this presentation. You're up.
Thank you, and good evening, Chair Staffy, board members, Superintendent McIntyre, and cabinet members. It's my pleasure to be with you this evening and to share information with you about our English Learner Program. I'd like to start by sharing some information with you about the students that we serve. In our district, about 11% of our total student population qualifies to receive services through our English Learner or EL program. As you can see on the chart in front of you, we serve about 2,350 students. Over the past several years, that hasn't changed much, but we have a slight increase in the number of students typically year upon year who qualify for services. In blue, you'll notice the students at the elementary level. That's comprising students who are in our voluntary pre-kindergarten programs through 5th grade who receive EL program services. And in the red, students at the secondary level in grades 6 through 12. So about 2/3 of the students that we serve are at the elementary level and 1/3 at the secondary level. When we break this down at the school level, you'll notice that we have some schools where more than 40% of our total student population receives services through the EL program. And also we have schools where fewer than 5% of this total student population receives EL program services. One thing to note about those schools where we have fewer than 5% of the students receiving services are that several of them are some of our newest program sites. So in the 2015-16 school year, we expanded EL programming to all of our schools so that students and parents would not have to make a choice between receiving EL program services and remaining at their home neighborhood schools. And so some of those sites are some of our newest program sites. Additionally, there are 69 languages represented by students who participate in EL program services. The district has more than 100, but within the EL program, 69. The top 5 languages within the EL program are Spanish, Hmong, World Englishes, Vietnamese, and Somali, and those are spoken by about 76% of the students who receive services. So another 64 languages represented in that remaining 24% of our students. So now that you know a little bit more about the students that we serve, I'd like to share some information with you about our language instruction educational program. There are both state and federal guidelines that inform and impact the programming that we provide to students. All districts in the state of Minnesota must have a written language instruction educational program plan that is shared with stakeholders and that serves as a blueprint for providing instruction that effectively meets the needs of the students that we serve. There are 3 main components of this plan. And the goal is for students to achieve state academic content standards and attain English proficiency, while also recognizing and cultivating the cultural and linguistic assets of our multilingual students. Before I share and explain a bit about the process for students to enter into programming, I'd like to share with you the definition that's currently in statute in the state of Minnesota for students to receive English Learner Program Services. The first is it's important to note that this applies to students who are in voluntary pre-kindergarten programs through grade 12. And the first of the two criteria is that students must use a language other than English. And the second is that we must determine through a valid language assessment that a student could benefit from support to develop English skills to participate in classes that are taught in English. So keep those two criteria in mind because you're going to see them reflected in the process for entering into EL programming. All students, when they enroll in a school in Minnesota, complete the Minnesota Language Survey. And that survey asks students and families about languages that influence the student's life. In our district, enrollment secretaries review those forms, and if a language other than English is indicated on the form, a referral is made to the EL office at the enrollment center. And there we have 2 EL intake facilitators who are teachers on special assignment who meet with families and learn more about the language that students use in their lives. They will determine whether or not they will administer a language assessment for a student, and the tools that we have available to us for that language assessment come to us from the WIDA Consortium and are approved by the state of Minnesota. The WIDA Consortium is a group of 40 U.S. states and territories that share common language development standards and common language assessments. And one thing you'll notice on the graphic here on the screen is you'll see levels and descriptors ranging from a 1 to a 6. And that is the scale that's used across all of these assessments. When we talk about both qualifying for services as well as exiting from programming, the scale from 1 to 6 is one that you'll see over and over again. And level 1 would describe a student who is just beginning to interact and develop skills in the English language. And a level 6 would be comparing a student who has the same level of proficiency in English as a native English-speaking peer. So one of the things that our staff at the Enrollment Center does is when they administer that assessment, they review those results with the families and explain to them a bit about what the scores mean and what that would look like for programming in our schools. So to share with you a bit about what this looks like for our students this year in our district. So you see this, the levels 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 across the bottom. You can see that the vast majority of the students that we serve this year in our school district are at level 3 or developing, which is an intermediate level of language proficiency. And you'll notice that there aren't very many at level 5. And that's because the state of Minnesota has set criteria for both entrance and exit, which would preclude most students who score at a level 5 from receiving EL program services. Most would not qualify. To break this down a little bit more by grade, there's a lot to see here, so I'll take a minute to explain. The same 5 levels of language proficiency are across the bottom, so level 1, entering, all the way to level 5, bridging. And additionally, you'll see at the bottom a legend with all these different colors. And within each column, the dark blue on the left side represents kindergarten, and the lighter kind of grayish blue on the right side represents 12th grade, so that you can see the distribution by grade at each proficiency level. And you'll note that the majority of the students who are at our more beginning levels of language proficiency are also at some of our earliest grades. So K, 1, and 2 make up the majority of the students at those levels of proficiency. The majority of the students who receive services through the EL program in our district are actually born in the United States. But their first experience with instruction and interacting with English language, for most, is when they enter into our schools. You'll notice there's a slight uptick again in around 8th or 9th grade. We do have a number of students who come to us new to the country into our secondary schools as well. There won't be any pre-K students here because they use a different language assessment and a different scale. So it would not be accurate to include them in this graphic. So once a student qualifies to receive EL program services in our schools, EL teachers work collaboratively with grade level and content area teachers to provide an instructional program that's specifically designed to meet the needs of that particular individual student. There are 2 main aspects of this programming, but we offer a continuum of services to meet a continuum of needs. We will offer services that are specific and very targeted around English language development instruction that would go beyond what a native English-speaking student would find useful. And we also support both academic language development and core content support. This instruction can happen in multiple settings. Teachers work collaboratively with grade level and content teachers in their classroom through co-teaching or other instructional supports. As well, this may happen in an EL classroom. The EL teachers that we have in our school district worked to align all of their instruction with standards, and two sets of standards. One is the Minnesota English Language Development Standards, which come from the WIDA Consortium, and there are 5, and they're represented in the graphic. At the middle, you'll see social and instructional language, and then in the 4 corners, you'll see the language of language arts, the language of science, the language of mathematics, and the language of social studies. This requires a very close connection to all of the grade level content standards, and so our teachers align with both English language development and content standards when they're providing support to students. As well, they make sure that they align their instruction to the students' level of language proficiency and the way that they're growing and developing. In addition to these direct services that are provided during the school day, we also offer extended time programming through after-school tutoring for our secondary students and summer programs at the elementary, the middle school, and the high school level. A really fun aspect for every student each year is the opportunity to take the annual language assessment. This is an assessment that's required by the state of Minnesota. It's called the Access for ELLs 2.0, and this assessment provides us information about how students are understanding and producing English that's used within school settings. The assessment looks at a student's listening, speaking, reading, and writing skills, and provides also an overall score, which is an aggregate of those different language domains. This is the state and federal accountability indicator under the Every Student Succeeds Act. The district staff will receive preliminary scores in late May, and results go to families in early September when the scores are official. A student's level of achievement on Access informs whether the student continues to receive EL program services during the next school year. Minnesota has common statewide proficiency criteria, and also, as a result, common statewide entrance and exit criteria. This is relatively new. This is the 3rd year that we've had this in place in Minnesota. This is part of the ESL work that has been done over the last couple of years. And on average, it takes a student between 5 and 7 years to reach proficiency in English. This chart shows you the percentages of students over the last few years who have exited from the EL program. In the blue line, you'll see the students who are in our voluntary pre-kindergarten programs. For the last couple of years, about 19% no longer qualify to receive EL program services moving into kindergarten. That's one of our celebrations and success stories, and in fact, staff at the Minnesota Department of Education recognize our program as one that's a model and will often refer other districts who are looking to establish or refine their programming for early learners to Osseo. And then in the red line, you can see the trend for students who are in grades K through 12. The trend line mirrors that of the state of Minnesota in terms of kind of moving up and down. But we have a higher percentage of students as compared to the state who reach proficiency criteria from year to year. This is one of our areas of success that's connected to language development and proficiency as compared to peers across the state. Others include the percentage of students meeting their growth targets as measured by Access for ELLs. We have more students who score at higher levels of proficiency in English. And yet, we haven't seen this translate yet into high rates of achievement on academic content assessments. And that's one of the reasons why our district identified improving our practices for multilingual students as an area of priority work. So to show you a little bit more about what that looks like, it's another colorful chart that I'll take a moment to explain because it's small and there's a lot on it. I'm going to start with the lines that you'll see across the center of the chart. The blue and the orange. Anything that you see with a solid line on this chart represents math, and anything in a dotted line will represent reading. The blue lines that you see represent the number of students in the EL student group in Osseo who are meeting or exceeding on MCA. And the orange represents the number of students in the EL student group across the state who are meeting or exceeding on MCA. So some good news that we've seen over the past couple of years is we previously were lagging behind the state in terms of the numbers of students who would achieve either a meeting or exceeding on MCA. And we've narrowed that and now are on par with peers across the state. However, if you remember, I said that we typically have more students who are meeting their growth targets, more students at higher levels of proficiency than peers across the state. So we would expect that to increase and to even be higher than it currently is. And then at the top of the chart, you see in green, all students in Osseo, and in yellow, all students in the state. And so that continues to illustrate the continuing work that we have in order to accelerate achievement for our multilingual students. So to assist with that, we have a number of things that we're working on this year with our priority work. At the district level, a significant investment has been made for all of our equity teams. Each school and department attends 2 equity seminars during the school year. One's in October, and another is coming up next week. So there are 14 hours of professional development that we provide to staff, and then there is ongoing and follow-up work that happens at the schools connected to that throughout the year. The focus of that work for this year is around improving our practices for multilingual students. We're using all of our system tools, the 3 C's of change, the protocol, the capacity equation. And one of the things that we've done in the interim between October and February is we've engaged in some student shadowing at all of our sites and in all of our departments to learn more about the lived experience of our students who receive ESL Program Services, specifically connected to their opportunities to engage with academic and speaking and listening. And one of the primary reasons for that is that we know that learning is a social process, and we know that students need to be doing between 70 and 80% of the talking in our classrooms. And we want them to be engaged with all of the language and the content at the grade level. And so we need to know more about what's happening right now in order to inform our work moving forward. So one of the things that we'll be doing in February is analyzing that data and making plans to move forward with professional development and to impact instruction and increase the amount of interaction that we have in our classrooms. Additionally, at the school level, we have established ELM project cohorts at 8 of our elementary schools. This is a partnership that we established with Hamline University, and we're in our 2nd year of implementation. The focus of this is using EL teachers in a slightly different role than they have been used in the past. In addition to the direct work that they're doing with students, they're providing ongoing professional development to cohorts of teachers in their school. They are coaching and collaboratively planning with their colleagues to implement different practices that are more supportive of our multilingual students. And we plan to expand that work to all of our elementary schools in the 2020-21 school year. And we continue to develop our co-teaching teams at all of our schools, both elementary and secondary. That's supported mainly through our district level staff who meet with teams as they're trying to implement different practices and also provide ongoing professional development. We've also been able to extend some additional resources, and one of those resources is our human resources that are making a difference this year in our schools. We are able to expand our EL staff development and assessment specialist positions, allowing us to provide more sustained and job-embedded professional development for our teachers and our administrators. And we have 2 positions this year, and each is working very closely with 8 schools so that we're able to more effectively support our schools and prioritize how we're providing that support. And lastly, we have access to a software called Elevation. This is a resource that we've had in place for our ELM project schools in the past, and because we were able to acquire some additional funds through extended time program, we were able to shift funding to make this available to all of our schools halfway through this school year. So this is one of the other things that we'll be highlighting at the equity team seminars coming up next week. This tool provides a resource to all teachers to help them effectively differentiate instruction for multilingual students so that they can equitably access the grade level content. There's professional development resources, access to student data, that's very differentiated for just the students that they're working with, and provides them with ideas about how they can actually implement our priority work around differentiated instructional strategies. So that comes to the end of the remarks that I've prepared to share with you, and I'd be happy to accept any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Directors, any questions?
I just wanted to comment that as you were presenting, I had many questions which you subsequently answered through your presentation. So thank you for being so thorough and all the information. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions. What assessment do you use with pre-K?
For pre-K, the assessment that we're using right now is called the pre-LAS.
Okay.
Do you need more information on that? Okay.
Is that through WIDA?
It's not. WIDA does not have any tools for early
pre-K yet?
learners yet. They're developing some, but they're quite different than some of the language screeners or assessment tools that we'd be used to because they're more observational based, but that's more appropriate for students at that age.
Definitely. Sorry. One of my questions is, when you said you have 2 positions, each working closely with 8 schools for the staff development specialist positions, does that mean we're serving 16 schools?
No, that means I'm supporting the others.
Okay.
Yes.
That's what I thought. Right.
We will be adding, hopefully, we're going to be posting and hopefully adding an additional EL staff development assessment specialist next year so that we can further reduce those numbers of schools to allow us to provide more targeted and more sustained support.
Okay. My next question, I'm going to geek out about the teaching. Do you have any preliminary data or qualitative data on the ELM project cohorts?
No, but that's something that we're designing a research study around. Okay. So with the addition of some additional positions around data coordination, that's one of the things that we are talking about investigating. And that's a report that we hope to be able to provide maybe in the springtime when we're talking about our summary of progress for our priority work.
Which just sounds really promising, and I'd like to see what kind of data is out of that.
At this point, we only have like anecdotal data from teachers who participate.
What kind of anecdotal data do you have?
Well,
That's qualitative data.
Yes. Well, one of the things that they are talking about is how the Elevation software resources have been so instrumental in helping them to figure out how to differentiate and provide more access for their students. And so that's one of the reasons why we were very highly interested in expanding that when we found out that we had the capacity, even though we weren't planning to do that this school year. So that's one of the things that they've provided information about. And they're finding, of course, that it's not only benefiting the multilingual students that they work with, but every student in their classroom. And so that's been very helpful as teachers have access to kind of an on-demand resource that they can use as they're trying to implement different practices. And then additionally, we have heard from staff, and this includes all the staff members who are part of these cohorts, administrators, EL teachers, as well as grade level teachers that are in the cohorts, that they see the role of the EL teacher really evolving in a very positive way as being more expert in their buildings and being someone that they collaborate with more consistently in order to support the students that they're all working with.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Director Simons?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for bringing this presentation forward. I think it was a really good response to the questions we had from the listening session, as well as board member education. And because this is not an area that I have a depth of knowledge in, I just wanted to better understand in the programming what type of academic instruction is occurring in native language versus the English language. That's the part I don't understand in what we do.
That's a great question. So we don't currently in our district offer any native language programming as part of the EL program. We do have some native language offerings at the secondary schools, but they're not connected with the EL program, although many students who participate in the EL program also participate in those classes. But we do not offer currently any like dual immersion or one-way immersion programs.
Okay, and so my concern is that with the length of time being 5 to 7 years to gain proficiency, that's lost instruction time. So with the software and other alternatives, can we support students differently to ensure that they're receiving curriculum that they can understand in their native language while also doing the English language work? Are any districts doing that? What's kind of the forward thinking in this area?
Yeah. So most districts actually have some immersion programs that they offer that are either dual immersion or one-way immersion programs. And so that is, I would say, kind of the standard way that that's happening across districts in our state as well as in the nation. Additionally, one of the things that's emerging is a practice called translanguaging, and that's one of the things that we will be sharing with the equity teams when they meet in session next week. And that is a practice of how any teacher can really build on the repertoire that each student has with all of the languages that they have available to them, and how do you highlight that in the classroom and make space for that in the classroom. And so that's one of the things that we can do and that we will do with our teachers in the interim.
Okay. And then how are parents whose children are in the EL program provided information about what to expect in the short term and the long term of the program? How are they updated on the progress of the student? Because we heard a specific concern about parents feeling that their student was ready to be moving on from the program, and that they didn't feel like they had the parental right to do so.
Okay, good question. So I will do my best to answer all of them, but if I'm forgetting something, please remind me. The first thing that parents would have in terms of that information would be happening at the enrollment center when they come to enroll, and they'll meet with our teachers on special assignment who work in the EL office at the enrollment center. So they will explain to them their students' language assessment scores, what that might mean in terms of programming in the schools. It does look different, sometimes school by school.
And is that with an interpreter, since that might be a language barrier?
Yes,
Okay.
that would be with an interpreter, sometimes live or sometimes using an over-the-phone interpreter. And sometimes families also aren't there. They may come to enroll, but their student's not there, and so they might have follow-up phone call conversations or email conversations. And after that, it would kind of shift to the school level, where the teachers who are working with the students would be the ones who are the primary contacts for the parents in terms of providing information about how the student's progressing with their language development, as well as, kind of generally in collaboration with other staff members who are working with the student, of course, through conferences, but then also, at other times throughout the year. The parents receive, it's called a parent guardian report for access for ELLs annually. So students actually take that assessment in February and March, and the results don't actually come into our district to be mailed out to families until the end of August. So that usually happens around the beginning of September. And so that can be kind of confusing for parents, actually, because there's such a gap in time that they get the paper and they're like, well, what does this mean? So there's often conversations that will happen again around that time to explain that. Additionally, at the beginning of each school year, we have to notify every family by mail of their student's status in the program, and based on what we made that determination. And currently, in the state of Minnesota, the only way to exit from EL programming is by achieving the proficiency criteria that's based off of access for ELLs. So there is no more any kind of local control or local capacity to be able to make a decision around exiting from EL programming if the student does not meet that proficiency criteria that's set by the state.
Which is written, not oral.
It is. So the criteria is a combination of listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Those are the 4 domains. And a student has to achieve domain scores of at least 3.5. And then those domain scores are combined into an overall or composite score. And they must achieve an overall composite score of 4.5 or higher. Okay, so it's kind of a layered criteria.
So I heard you say, based on what the state of Minnesota requires, a parent does not have the right to withdraw their own student from the program unless they pass the proficiency test.
They can withdraw or refuse services at any point, but they cannot exit, we cannot
okay, got it.
exit a student from the program until
Understood.
they meet that criteria.
Okay. Right, thank you.
Let me follow up on that. So what's the difference between they withdraw the student, say, I don't want you to deal with my student any longer, versus exiting the program? Is that a financial commitment from the state to the district, or what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so exiting from the program would indicate that the student has achieved a certain level of proficiency in English. And after that point, there is a financial consideration where the student would no longer generate funds that are set aside for students who qualify for ESL Program Services, because the student has demonstrated that he or she has reached that level of proficiency in English. But withdrawing from the program simply indicates that the parent or guardian does not wish for their student to receive those services, even though they would continue to qualify for them.
Or to be tested, correct?
They would be tested because they continue to qualify for programming, and refusing testing is an additional step to refusing programming, which is also very confusing for families. And both of those things are things that the state requires us to do on an annual basis.
And for context, in the story that we heard, the experience that we heard was that the student, the parent felt that the student had mastered, especially in terms of oral versus maybe written,
Yes.
and was not being able to access the other educational opportunities because of the time that the EL services and classes were taking. So they were actually missing out on other opportunities that they felt that they were desiring and ready for. So I just want to add that context.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful clarification.
I just have a follow-up question to that really quick. Oh, sorry. Is that found under the Minnesota Educational for English Learners Act, that specific requirement, or is that handed down from the Minnesota Department of Education?
So it is in a couple of places, and so it's written into our state's Every Student Succeeds Act plan. It's one of the components of that plan. So under Every Student Succeeds Act, all states were required to have common criteria and processes for entrance and exit into EL programming. So it's written into our ESSA plan, and there are different elements of statute that are impacted by that.
Okay, thank you.
Kelsey? Any questions? Any other direct questions, Director Craig? None for you?
Nope.
Okay. Back here?
Okay, so you just mentioned something that made me wonder. If let's say a student is entered into the program, and at the get-go, maybe the parent doesn't believe that the student necessarily needs those services, and they withdraw their student, let's say first or second grade. Yes. That child will continue to have to take the access test till they exit our school system under this rule that you're talking about. Is that correct?
Potentially, yep. So students who qualify for EL program service are those who are required to participate in the annual language assessment, which is access for ELLs. Parents can refuse participation in that through a separate process. It mirrors that for MCA and other statewide assessments. Okay. Or if the student does complete the assessment and they reach that proficiency criteria, then they would exit, and then they would no longer be designated as a student who qualifies for those services, and thus would no longer be included in testing.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. I had one more question.
Yeah.
In the very beginning, you had said that the two criteria were the home language survey and English language proficiency screener, and the language survey, that's where the parents identify the child, correct?
Correct. And they are asked questions about how the student uses language, and they respond.
So I guess two kind of questions about that is, if a parent does not identify their child, but they do need services, how does that happen? And the other part is, what if a parent identifies their child, but their child doesn't really need the services? Is that kind of ruled out through the English language proficiency screener?
Yes.
Okay.
And so it happens where students might be referred to the EL office. So last year, for example, there were 2,000 students who were referred to the EL office at the enrollment center for a possible language assessment. It ended up that only about 50% of them qualified for services.
Okay.
And so some of them, through conversation with our staff members, it was determined that, it's not really appropriate to administer the assessment. The student primarily uses English, perhaps grandma helps to take care of the child and the grandma perhaps speaks another language. But the student's primary language is English, so they would not do an assessment in those cases. Or if they do an assessment, sometimes the families want to know, or they're unsure, or they think the student may benefit from support. Sometimes there are cases where after completing the assessment, the student scores at a proficient level, and they would not qualify for services in that case. And then your first question was about the home language survey itself.
Well, I guess, let's say a parent doesn't identify their child, maybe they think their child doesn't need it, and then child comes to school and a teacher thinks that maybe they do. How is that addressed?
Okay, so we have a process for that. It's written into our language education or language instruction educational plan. That's called a post-enrollment referral, but we actually cannot have any student qualifying for EL program services if their home language is English. So typically the first step in that would be their classroom or content area teacher having a conversation with the parent or guardian about the languages that are used by the student and learning more about that. And then if it comes to be that there is in fact the influence of another language, they actually have to go back and update that home language survey to reflect that.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a couple questions. First, what is World English?
World English would be varieties of English that are spoken around the world. So they might be Englishes from Liberia, Jamaica. Of course, there's Australian and British English. Those are all different varieties of English that are spoken around the world. So we have a number of students who come from countries where there is a different variety of English that's spoken there, but different from standard American English, but their own language systems.
Okay. And we have 200 receiving services.
200 speakers of World Englishes?
Right.
Yes, about that. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that's under the receiving services, not just in our district?
Correct. There are more than that in our district as a whole.
Okay. So the data that you showed for the last 3 years indicated about a 7-year time frame for exit on average. If you looked at K through 12, not VPK. So 7+ on average. What's our goal to bring that down to 5 or to 4 or to 3? How, we talked about improving, doubling the amount of training, adding people, spending a lot more money. So what are the goals? So what are the goals to go from 7 years to 3 years or whatever that time frame should be or can be?
Yeah, good question. So one of the things that we're doing now is, and this is actually connected to the state's work around implementing Every Student Succeeds Act. One of the things that has happened recently is that each student now has a timeline to proficiency. That's part of our statewide accountability system. And so we are using those same timelines, and there are a number of factors that go into creating that timeline for each student. One of them has to do with where that student started in their journey in our school systems. In regards to their overall level of language proficiency. Another has to do with the age of the student or the grade in which they entered our system. And another has to do with the degree that the student has had opportunities for formal education. So those are different things that are combined into setting a timeline for students. But most students have a timeline of 5 or 6 years. And so every year when they take this annual language assessment, they have progress targets to hit. And so we are keeping track of whether or not our students are meeting their growth targets, because if they're meeting their growth targets, that means that they are likely to hit that proficiency criteria within that time frame. And that is definitely our goal. We do not want to have large numbers of students who enter our schools in Minnesota, whether it's in our district or in others, in kindergarten, and continue to receive EL program services at the secondary level, although we certainly have students in that scenario currently. So that's one of the things that we're working to change, and I think it's very helpful for our staff to have that new timeline system set up as part of our accountability system, because it really helps us to see over time how students are progressing towards meeting those targets, because we want our students to become proficient in a reasonable amount of time.
And I think as was mentioned, the options for dual language and immersion, I think our strategies at the board and the district could take as accelerators to that in the future.
Yes.
And I know Director Douglas and I attended some sessions at the MSBA School Board Conference that we got pretty excited about.
Yes,
Very.
I would agree. There's a lot of research to back that up, as well as to show higher rates of achievement with the academic content assessments as well.
So another question that may seem odd, but to everyone else here, but to me, it goes back to the data. You're talking about kids in the program who were mainly born in the U.S. that have different languages at home.
Yes.
So if you take a child coming in at first grade, and you take another child also born in the U.S. who has English spoken at home, how would they compare on that same assessment at grade 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5? Just how big is the gap of English language skills between those two groups?
Well, that is the question that a lot of EL educators would like to know the answer to, because we don't administer that assessment to any native English-speaking students, and the bar is high in terms of the kind of language we're asking for students to be able to process through listening and reading and to produce through speaking and writing. But unfortunately, that's not something I can answer with any degree of reliability, because we don't administer that assessment to native English-speaking students.
So that would seem to be a baseline requirement, to know exactly how you're doing compared to native speakers, if you will. So without that, how do we really know how our kids are doing compared to their peers? Here's Mr. Data and Outcomes and Assessment coming out here. So
I'm not sure what got into all the test design when this assessment tool, or tools, because there's a package of them, were created through the WIDA consortium. So I'm not sure what they looked at in terms of our actual language assessments. But we do have other indicators that we can and do use, and some of them are not, most are not language-based. Especially the ones that are standardized, like MAP and MCA. But we do have formative assessments that our teachers do in their classrooms that can look at both language and content development, and that's really the only collection of language data that we would have that is for both our multilingual and our native English-speaking students.
So to gain a better baseline, would it be appropriate to ask 100 parents to volunteer for their children to take this test in the next year? Or 200, or whatever would give us a fair baseline?
It's probably not designed for English speakers, though. Is that fair? I don't know what the test specs would be allowing for.
Yes, I'm not
It's
sure.
not
I mean,
normed
I think it would allow us to see whether or not native English-speaking students are achieving at the rates that we would expect them to, because the expectations for students change based on their age. And they are trying to compare them to a native English-speaking peer. So I guess that would help us to know whether or not that is actually the case. Yeah, but I don't know that we'd be able to do that. I'm unsure.
Wouldn't we want to know whether it was normed on English-speaking students too? Otherwise, you can't make comparisons statistically. Those are good questions to find out, but now now we're asking for more testing.
As I said, ask the parents to volunteer to help us help the rest of our students perform better. So that's certainly something that could be asked of parents, and I'm sure several would be willing to help.
Well, and I think, as I mentioned before, a lot of the practices that we use to support multilingual students in developing not only their English but their academic language skills support every student, because no one is a native speaker of academic language. We all learn that when we go to school.
Okay. I think that's it for my questions now. Directors, any follow-up questions to any of that? Any further ones you thought of? All right.
Just one more thing. My understanding is to get an EL license, you have to have some proficiency in another language. Is that correct? Still?
I'm not certain if that still is the case in all of the programs that are available, but in many, that is a component of their programs.
Okay, I just wanted to highlight that because the EL teachers that I know do some of that cross language that we were worried about, because they happen to have some Spanish or French or whatever the language is.
Yes. And I just think, when I looked at the chart about the percentage of students receiving EL services, I just think it's really great that you've changed it to the EL program in all of our schools. So students have to choose and they can stay in their school.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, appreciate it.
I just want to mention real quickly that how fortunate we are as a district and as a system to have Kirsten at the realm with the wealth of knowledge she has and the connectedness that she has to our community and to our state. So we are blessed to have Kirsten here and can't thank her enough for the work that she does. So I just wanted to make a comment on that. So thank you, Kirsten.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, Patrick. The next agenda item is the consent agenda. Board members, are there any items you would like to remove for separate consideration? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as printed?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second, is there any discussion? One item of financial interest to everybody, the Hennepin Youth Sports Grant approval. I believe we're accepting it for $80,000, which will go to improving conditions at the ice rink, and boosters will help match those funds to improve the conditions for the students who use that and for the community. So thank you to Hennepin County, and thank you to our boosters who are working to make that happen. So that's what I wanted to identify, and any other discussion on that? If not, all in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Consent agenda is accepted 6-0, or past 6-0. Let's see, next are our action items. Our first action item is the general fund adjustments and capital fund approval for fiscal year 2021, which is the current year. Mr. Meyer.
Good evening, Chair Ostafi, Superintendent McIntyre, and school board members. The purpose of this evening's presentation is to provide information about the fiscal year 2021 recommended operating budget adjustments and the fiscal year 2021 proposed capital expenditure budget. This presentation will include information for action item A on the board agenda. Our recommendation this evening will be that the school board approve the budgets as presented. The recommendations being shared this evening are part of the annual budget planning process. Budget decisions are made using the Long Range Financial Planning Framework, or LRFP. This framework includes a financial forecasting model that projects out for the next several years and provides the basis of our budget planning while focusing on financial sustainability. The budget decisions are evaluated using a collaborative approach that engages multiple stakeholders. Budget planning includes aligning our resources with the mission and strategic plan, an assessment of the impact on productivity and essential services, and compliance with legal requirements. The school board engages in several work sessions throughout the year, throughout the budget development process, and at the February 11th school board work session, the board heard about and considered the budget adjustment recommendations. So this evening, our first action item for your consideration is the fiscal year 2021 budget adjustments. We will first review the operating fund recommendations. In keeping with direction provided by the school board, the fiscal year 2021 general operating transportation budget adjustment recommendations include no changes in budget capacity. The only exception to this is for an increase in classroom FTE to support increases we anticipate in enrollment. An important feature of the LRFP process is that budget managers annually review their budgets and make recommendations to realign resources to better meet the strategic priorities of the school district. This ensures that the budget is directly tied to the district's mission. So while general fund recommendations result in no overall change to budget capacity other than the enrollment-related staffing increases, it redirects resources towards the following areas while utilizing revenue offsets where applicable. The addition of 5 FTE early childhood special education teachers. The addition of 1 FTE teacher for the homebound program. The addition of 3 FTE teacher substitutes for special education. the addition of 5 FTE elementary counselors, the continuation of school-linked mental health services, the addition of 2 FTE special education contingency, the addition of 1 FTE health services coordinator, the addition of 7 FTE ESPs, which will add 1 hour of ESP time to every elementary resource teacher allocation, and the addition of 1 FTE maintenance lead. The program efficiency, abandonment, and redirection, or PAIR process, a summary of which is in your board packet, provides details of the recommended adjustments along with the category for the change, the dollar amount, and a summary of the change. PAIR adjustments are also being recommended in the General Operating Transportation Fund for strategic investments. These investments do not have an expenditure or revenue offset, and thus will be an impact on the fund balance. These budget adjustments impact 3 different areas. The first is to add district-wide communication to establish the district as a primary source of information about Osseo area schools. The second is to add 3 FTE grounds custodians at the high school level. And the third is to provide ESP staff development. Again, PAIR summaries for each of these requests are included in your board packet. As a follow-up to the February 11th work session, where board members indicated an interest in increasing the amount of ESP staff development from the current request of 1 training, staff has discussed options to accomplish this interest. While there are several options to increase opportunities for more ESP trainings, additional time is needed to create the best training and implementation plan to accomplish this goal. Therefore, the budget adjustment request this evening is for the original $30,000 that was proposed. And as additional opportunities are identified, staff will bring forth recommendations to the school board for a possible mid-year adjustment next year for additional training opportunities. In conclusion, we are recommending that the school board approve these budget adjustments this evening. Also on the agenda this evening is the fiscal year 2021 capital expenditure budget. The school board discussed this budget at the February 11th work session, and I will provide an overview of the expenditures for the operating capital budget and the capital projects, or what's commonly referred to as a technology levy budget. This slide shows the proposed budget for our operating capital by division and department. Operating capital, as a reminder, is a zero-based budget, so each item included in this funding proposal was accompanied by a capital request and was moved through the LRFP process. The items included in the operating capital budget must align with statutory guidance for designation as a capital item. Any staff salary and benefits included in these capital budgets must be directly related to the acquisition, operation, and maintenance of telecommunication systems, computers, and related equipment. DLTL's request of $2,461,688 includes items such as the purchase of the elementary and secondary curriculum, curricular software licenses and online resources, and media center materials. It also includes site allocation for student, teacher, and administrator furniture and equipment, uniforms and equipment for activities, and replacement of music instruments. The HART, or Human and Administrative Resource Team, division requests of $5,044,075 includes $3.9 million for the leases that are funded through the lease levy. In addition, division requests include continued payments for capital leases and special assessment taxes, replacement and upgrade to video surveillance cameras, and the replacement of custodial and grounds equipment. The I2T2 division requests of $1,167,916 include annual fees for our enterprise applications such as Synergy, Student Management System, eFinance Plus, maintenance and cybersecurity assessment tools, implementation of our online enrollment software system, and other replacement technology. The total for operating capital expenditure is $8,673,679. This slide shows the proposed budget for the capital projects or technology levy. This levy funding is the result of voter approval from 2013. DLTO's request of $534,000 includes items such as the purchase of online resources and media center materials. The I2T2's division request of $6,641,516 includes the continuation of payments for existing and new mobile device leases. It has supports for online resources, software licenses, technology equipment, and media materials. This levy also funds I2T2 staff that directly support the district's technology infrastructure and instructional programming. Our clicker's having a few problems here.
And Ron, to be clear, this is fiscal year 2021.
That is correct. It's for next year.
Okay, it says 2020.
Oh, I apologize. Yes, that should be fiscal year 2021.
Thank you.
So in conclusion, we recommend approval of the fiscal year 2021 capital expenditure budget that includes operating capital and the capital projects levy expenditures for a total of $15,849,195. Tonight's approval of these budgets allows staff to proceed with the staffing process and to begin pre-planning for items that require lead time for completion prior to the start of the fiscal year 2021 school year. We will finalize our budget details as well as monitoring the ongoing work of the legislative session and those results that may impact our budget. The budgets will be included with the entire budget package that we will discuss at the June 9th school board work session, and that will be presented to the school board for approval at the June 23rd, 2021 regular school board meeting, or 2020 regular school board meeting, sorry. With that, I will take any questions that you may have.
So to be clear, there's really two things we would vote on, and they're really separate items, or maybe even three. One's the general fund adjustments. One is the operating capital fund, and the other is the technology levy.
Yeah, we have them as two separate ones, the capital, which includes both the operating capital and the tech levy, and then the general fund adjustments.
Okay, so there's two different votes there. Correct. Those are two different items. Okay.
Yep. And that was on the first slide. I can go back to that as well. So those two action items.
Okay.
Ron, so following our facilities audit, there's been some interest about our summer projects that are our 2020 projects we reviewed back in November. So at this point in time, the plan and the expenditures associated with that, that's behind us at this point, just for clarification in terms of the process and.
Are you talking about the LTFM,
Yes.
long-term facility
Yes.
maintenance? Yeah,
Yes.
so that is a different budget, and we will
Exactly.
be bringing our 10-year plan later on this spring.
Yes. So I just wanted to clarify that in terms
Yes.
of the process versus what
Yep.
we're doing tonight. Okay.
Yep, so what we talked about late last fall, early winter was long-term facility maintenance and the projects that we're approving for next year, and that will be a part of our 10-year plan that we'll bring forth in the spring.
Correct. Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Okay. Directors, any other questions?
Mr. Chair, I just have a question on procedure. Are you going to take this as two separate items to vote on?
Yes.
It is listed differently on the agenda, so.
Yeah, and I'm not, it's, here we have two action items here. It says and, I mean, there are two separate distinct budgets that were, actually three, but those two are combined. So right now, we'll take them as two and entertain other motions.
Okay.
The capital expenditure for the DL, for a information that was given to us just last week, that was that's in the capital projects.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yep, capital projects levy, and it's a year one lease line item.
Okay, all right. Any other questions before we move to a discussion?
Can I just add one point
Yes,
of clarification
Superintendent,
so that might help with longer range thinking? We are going to be able to reset as we move into next year, setting our district priorities ahead of our budgeting process. So that'll take a bit of a reset in the fall. So we'll just change that timing up, and so when you're getting to this point next year, you'll have the following year's priorities set ahead of that. So we're working towards that process, and we'll do that in the fall of next year. So we'll set next year's priorities this spring, and turn right back around in the fall and set the following year's priorities in the fall ahead of the budgeting cycle. So just previewing what's coming in our system improvement cycle. And we'll be talking about that at a coming work session. I think right now tentatively set up for March.
Okay. Any other questions? So with that, our first action item will be to approve the fiscal year 2021 budget adjustments to the general fund. Is there a motion to approve the general fund adjustments for fiscal year 2021 budget?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? I think we had a good work session last week. I don't know that there was any major comments or issues that came out of that. We are, as Superintendent McIntyre said, we are ramping up our strategic planning right now, and we'll have a way of redirecting some of this much sooner than a year from now. So I think that's the little gap that we're bridging right now. So any other discussion on that? Comments? With that, all in favor of accepting the fiscal year 2021 budget adjustments for the general fund, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, passes 6-0. The next action item on tonight's agenda is to approve the fiscal year 2021 capital expenditure budget, which consists of the operating capital expenditure budget and the capital projects levy budget. Is there a motion to approve those two budgets, the capital, operating capital expenditure budget and the capital projects levy budget?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second. Is there any discussion? Our meeting last week. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. I would just like to make a statement. As you all know, I have a lot of feelings about the tech levy and how we use technology in our schools. So I'd just like to say that I have significant concerns about the use and distribution of technology in our schools, particularly in the lower grades. Numerous well-respected organizations have studied and researched the use of technology by children and young adults, and the research is overwhelmingly clear that there is a connection between the rise of technology use and in young children and social, emotional, and behavioral issues. The increase of use of screens does affect how a child's brain develops and responds to input. Technology, apps specifically, which are often used in our schools, are designed to trigger rapid pleasure response in children, which can lead to addictive behaviors and impulse control, among other things. However, I do acknowledge and recognize that technology does have a place in education and can be effectively used to differentiate learning, increase learning opportunities, and promote an inclusive environment. I encourage the district to use extreme caution when considering and evaluating technology use in our schools. I support the district's continued evaluation of technology use, increased professional development around technology use, parental education around technology use, and study of how tech is supporting students and staff in reaching our priority goals and strategic work. Continuous monitoring of how technology is impacting our learning is critical to our students' achievement, and I would encourage you to continue to take these things under advisement as we move forward.
Thank you, Heather. That was actually a very nice summary of the very in-depth discussion that we had. That's really a nice summary of all of those points. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Mosqueda-Jones, any comments?
My comments are, I'm well aware of the brain research on technology, and I am also a teacher and use technology with students, not my pre-K students, but other students, well, depending upon how you define it. And I feel that is very important right now that we have an opportunity to really address a lot of things in our society. And I've been looking at these 4 questions that I got from another school board on making decisions and whether or not we're going to make this decision. Is it going to provide opportunities for students that have been underserved historically? Does it help ensure equitable access? Does it help eliminate barriers, and does it ensure the same standards? And I think technology can be a great equalizer. I also think that technology gives us access to different cultural lenses that we might not be able to get in many of our textbooks. I believe that it gives us an opportunity to teach students about their own brains and what different things do to their brains and how to use it appropriately. I also have noticed a lot of students, young people using the internet in inappropriate ways, and we have excellent, well-educated teachers in this district that can teach a beautiful digital citizenship program that can help our students. I do agree that parent education would be a phenomenal thing addressed to this, but in light of the fact that some of our families are so overstressed that it's hard to even think about these things, we have an opportunity to address it in the schools. And so I'm wholeheartedly for this budget the way it is, but I wanted to give kind of the holistic reasons behind it.
PsychCentral.com published a study that said more screen time tied to depression, suicidal behavior in teens. Screen time use tied to children's brain development in a negative way, especially around language skills. Let me see. Many schools have looked to adopt certain technology items and have withdrawn them after there's been backlash from teachers and parents and students and a lack of performance of what was expected. Those are all significant issues, every single one of them. When you talk about brain development, you're talking about depression, suicidal tendencies, you're talking about the inability or poor note-taking in class, less comprehension for reading. And, these are things that I, about every 2 weeks something pops up and I send it to Anthony and I send it to Corey, and I've been doing so for 2 years. There's a couple issues that I have. One, we had a 1 hour and 15-minute discussion of this program for pre-K through 5, less than a week ago. That's not sufficient, in my mind, to get the board together to look at all of the data and look at all of the particular programs. That's just not sufficient time. I was very disappointed that this was put forward at this point in the budget process with that small time for discussion. And also, there was nothing from the district on any of the potential downsides. None of the, we brought it up, you brought it up, we've all done our independent thing, but I didn't see anything from the district bringing up the negatives that parents are well aware of. We're obviously well aware of because we've done our own research, but I'm just wondering why that wasn't brought forward from the district standpoint. We want 1 hour, 15 minutes, 1 week, let's go. I think the capital budget for that piece was about $500,000 this year for the leases for the new Chromebooks in the 4th and 5th grade. Multiply that by 3 or 4, I believe, so it's really not a $500,000 expenditure. We're approving 1.5 to 2. And again, there's significant concerns from physicians, from biologists, from neurosciences, neuroscientists, and all of those things. And I don't know that we've been presented all the information from that standpoint to make a decision in 1 week and an hour and 15 minutes of group discussion. So that's, I understand everyone's position, that's mine. So, Dr. Simons?
Yeah, so I think we really had a healthy discussion about the pros and cons that were of a strategic nature in the work session. And the purpose, though, of that discussion was more focused on the budget side. So we hadn't necessarily had that type of strategic conversation before. So I think that that's definitely a process improvement. And as Corey alluded to, as we think about the timeline of when we set strategy and we have those really big, impactful, strategic conversations, I think that's where we would want to continue to explore that and to think about what type of monitoring we could put in place, how are we measuring, how are we hearing the teacher voice. And I know we did get some good student voice. We had some really great demonstrations of how technology is being used at different levels in the classrooms. So I would welcome continued work in evaluating the strategy going forward. And it's also, I think, a concern maybe that parents need to be part of. So maybe there's an opportunity for a community conversation on this topic as more and more data emerges and is maybe a bit of a cause for some pause. We also talked about the state standards that are going to be requiring us to adopt some new practices in order to meet those and to have the technology to do that. So that's also a factor in the decision. Which then kind of goes with our legislative platform later on in terms, again, of the timing of when we know things are coming at us and how we can be informed and educated so that we can support our district in having a voice in those standards as well. So because of the nature of the timeline, I think it would be disruptive not to approve this at this time, but I think that we need to come back and continue to have that strategic conversation. And any of these technology decisions that we make in terms of deploying technology, we can always redeploy in different ways going forward. So it's not a lost investment in my view.
I'd like to add on that project timeline that was presented last spring to the school board and again in October, that this technology resource recommendation was coming, followed with this spring a recommendation around educational screen time use and how the direct implementation would happen at the elementary level. So there will be ongoing conversation about the actual implementation of the technology and further discussion around this topic.
Thank you. I thank you for saying that, Anthony. That's what I was going to say. I don't know why we were surprised about it because this is another rollout of the technology, and I think at any time we know that we can call our the cabinet to ask questions about the progress, and so I think it was done in a very timely manner. I think we had a good discussion. Some points were brought up that I think were pretty compelling to listen to and think about. But at the end of the day, I do think would be extremely disruptive, and we have a levy for technology. I've spent some time talking to teachers about what this would do to their classrooms, and I mean, it sounds like even my daughter, a second grade teacher, talks about the way the Chromebooks are working for guided reading, with the IXL, for being really ability-based, and with that differentiated learning is really, really critical. They're not just playing around on it just for fun. It's very educational. And that neighboring districts have, just like they have Fayed and other programming, they also, have technology classes once a week. So I think that just kind of says a lot where technology is going in schools. And, I just, we know keyboarding is really important in many aspects. So I guess I would say I really liked what you said, Jackie. I think it can be the great equalizer here. And I believe heavily in parent education. And I also think that I think that we can look at all these studies and, psychologists, but I don't think anybody's landed on like one way to do things. And I think we also sometimes have to rely on our teachers and the people that are in the classroom every single day. I mean, I was just in a classroom today, and the amount of time as a teacher, kids are going to different, programs and classes and pullouts, and just to keep track of everything. And this is just really helpful to bring some structure to their classrooms as well. So I fully support this. I think this is really great work, and I'm really excited to see this rolled out and implemented.
Director Craig?
I'll just briefly say that this has been an ongoing conversation for at least the past 6 years in our district. We've had previous board members who, essentially a platform item of theirs, and I know that Heather has been a huge advocate of this for the past 4 years at least. So I can see the benefits in my own children's education when it's supplemented with the technology. In particular, my 5th grader who's able to do her band work on the technology, it's helpful. But I do have questions. How early are we implementing the technology and how much are we using it? So in the early years. So this is a struggle. So I'll be thinking about that tonight.
Can I just offer a couple more research things?
Sure.
Since that was brought up a few times. My background is in family social science, and I've looked at the research quite a bit in this particular area, mostly because I was raising my children when I was first starting to get out, and I want to know what this new thing was. The research is pretty clear that you have to have an extensive amount of time. The average child gets like 8 hours of screen time a day. And so this is an opportunity we have in the schools to counterbalance some of that by teaching how we can use it. And the research will say things like it's the lighting and this and that triggers the stress hormones in the brain, which is why we have some problems with developing those social skills. And those kinds of disruptions can happen in lots of different ways, not just technology. And we now know from when, the research just came out, ways to ameliorate that or to kind of buffer those issues. There's different screen backgrounds, there's different types of things. There's even research that, watching Mr. Rogers actually helped people calm down, and that's media. So it really depends on what we're talking about and how we use it. And I want to be really careful when we're talking about research and what things report what the research says if we haven't looked at the in-depth analyses and data of the research. That's just kind of where I wanted to.
I'd also like to clarify on the recommendation that budget item, it's not looking to change really what exists already in the
Exactly.
elementaries. So the pair in particular is to refresh what already exists in 3rd, 4th, and 5th so that technology doesn't get outdated. And the discussion we had about K1 and 2 is actually about standardizing across the district the resources that exist. So we have elementaries that have more resources than that, and we have some elementaries that have some resources under that. And that recommendation would be to stabilize that and equalize the access across all our elementary buildings for what they have access to at those grade levels.
So let me clarify that we don't have Chromebooks in 4th and 5th grade today.
No, but we have iPads in 4th and 5th grade, and we have
Right.
carts of Chromebooks in some of our elementary buildings that
Right.
some 4th and 5th access as well.
So it's not sustaining what we have, it is indeed changing what we have, correct?
Well, it'd be instead of replacing iPads with iPads, it's replacing iPads with Chromebooks.
Right. In doing it at this time, are we losing these off lease, or can we extend them? Can we buy them? Are they enough for the next 1 year as we finalize our strategic intent and our strategic program?
So we've already owned them for over a year. The leases have been done on those iPads. However, those iPads will outdate and they will not update to the current software as of next school year. So they will not fully function as a device. So as we think about some of the applications that are used on there, in particular when we talk about assessment and some of the particular apps teachers may be using, they won't be usable at that grade level.
Are you saying that there won't be backwards compatibility on some of these programs of one generation?
No, there won't be. Pearson updates their TestNav application on a pretty regular basis, and they don't backwards compatibility with them.
And you're suggesting that we still go with the issues with interactive displays and staff technology. Is the laptop program a part of this or no? Is it standalone and not a part of this?
The recommendation is to move staff to laptops and implement interactive whiteboards or interactive displays, but that would not be occurring next year because there's not the budget capacity at this time. So we would have to further build out our long-term budget capacity and our plan with that, which we've already looked at and evaluated based on what projects are coming on and going off in future years after fiscal year 21.
So for 1 year, what would be better, getting the technology, the updated technology into the hands of our teachers, into the classrooms, i.e. the wireless and the boards, or starting to buy Chromebooks that for 4th and 5th that we don't know what the program will be a year from now?
I would say based on the data and the evidence that we collected from students and staff through our pilots and our survey data and examining what we're doing instructionally and looking at moving forward, a Chromebook will serve our current needs as well as provide opportunities for our future needs as we develop strategic plans out and curricular resources that would be engaged with that.
One thing you had mentioned, that we had the voices of students and teachers of how this, Director Simons made a very clear point that, did we really bring parents into this, especially at the youngest grades where parents have a significant issue of trying to control screen use of their children. And you also made it clear that we have not had the input of doctors and scientists and neuroscientists and any of those researchers or psychologists at this point. But we're asking to move forward with a budget expenditure prior to the finalization of all of the data on the potentially harmful effects on the children that have been acknowledged, that there is research that indicates that there are potential several concerns. So I'm just, again, we're putting the cart before the horse. I would suggest that it may have been better to come forward with the significant concerns of the biology and then look at the technology.
So I think to clarify though, we are talking about replacement in order to serve existing curriculum. We were not having a conversation at the work session or in this decision about changing curriculum. So we would not have had more discussion on the benefits of the curriculum that we're having today. That wasn't part of the recommendation or the discussion topic, correct? Right.
Yep. And I think the added benefits as we discuss further in the future of what those curriculum changes could be, as well as the intentional implementation. As I shared at the work session around the vision that we've been changing at the secondary building and would go into what we're looking at trying to change the shift of what we're trying to do with technology at the elementary, is it's more about production, students producing work and engaging in meaningful engagement with that device as opposed to a primary consumption device of media, which when you look at many of the brain research studies that are talking about the counter-narrative, they're really looking at consumption of media and consumption of text, consumption of video, as opposed to production of work or engagement in coding, creating multimedia presentations, creating PowerPoint presentations or Google Slides presentations that they could present their voices and ideas to a class and their learning and demonstrate learning through technology as opposed to, again, just consuming a bunch of media.
Do you have some questions, Jackie?
I think Heather had something.
Actually, I was just going to ask Anthony to say what we had talked about, which he just said, so.
I would just quickly add that just at conferences recently with my 5th graders teacher, they were in the process of teaching their digital citizenship. There's a big, huge concern right now with TikTok and the 5th graders at this particular school. So there is concern around overusage and whether or not our devices allow it. I'm not sure if they're blocked or if that particular site's blocked or not. There are some concerns. So that's, I know that's kind of a little bit off of what we're voting on, but it's still within the realm of where I'm thinking, so.
I would like to jump in too. I appreciate you mentioning that because I think from as a whole, as I listen to this conversation and the rich conversation you had last week, clearly as a board, you're taking this very seriously. You've raised a number of legitimate concerns. And really what you're doing for us is setting expectations moving forward. Wherever you land on this particular vote, you've helped us shape what do we need to evaluate and really look into more deeply and be very clear on our expectations and be very purposeful. And I guess I'm hearing Anthony say that. What's the purposeful use and how are we intentionally using those, and having some pretty defined parameters and expectations for use and reporting back to you on those things, because you've listed a number of legitimate concerns, moving forward with how we roll this out, how we implement it, what does it look like day to day in the classroom. So from that perspective, you have a range of opinions on this, and you see it from different lenses. But I do commend you on asking hard questions and wrestling with this, because we all want to get it right. And this is not the first time where education and the medical field collide. I see it in other areas of our work too, where there's crossover and making sense of those practices and professional standards. And it won't be the last time we wrestle with that either. But that's just my comment is, regardless of where you fall on your vote, if it does pass, we have clear direction on what we need to be studying and getting feedback on, and how we can improve on that evaluation process, whether it's parents, additional student voice, additional teacher voice, moving forward and through our evaluation of, is it working?
Will you indulge me for a minute?
Sure, go right ahead.
Okay. So today I'm teaching in my pre-K class, and we have a teacher that is 3 doors away from me who teaches LCD, learning cognitive delay is the label for the students that he has, and they're fabulous students. And he has actually made great academic strides with his kids that were told that they wouldn't achieve certain academic levels through technology and through voice to text and things like that. So today they come in with their iPads, and they had all looked at different facial shapes, and they all drew these like goofy little characters, and they uploaded them onto this voting site, and they came in and they asked my 4-year-olds to vote for one. And so that interaction between the language that they had to develop and my students being able to engage with students that are different than them in certain ways and older, and they're looking up to them, is just, that's a beautiful kind of thing that we can do. And I am kind of excited to see where we go with that. And I had to share that because it was really pretty cool. And my assistant couldn't decide, so the student who had difficulties communicating with adults said to her, "Why don't you think about it for a little bit? And I'm going to go ask this other student, and when I come back, maybe you'll have a decision." And I thought that was, I don't know, if you had seen these students, you would cry. I did.
No, and I, from that standpoint, I absolutely agree. We've used technology to enhance learning of different groups and students for years, without a doubt. And I think there's absolutely a place for that without necessarily peanut butter spreading it across every grade and every level. And as Superintendent McIntyre said, when it comes down to ed versus med, I'm going to take the med when it comes to brain and behavior development. So that becomes an issue. So, just think about that. Yes, there is educational inputs, there's medical inputs, but when it comes to brain development and behavior development based upon brain scans, I'm working with the med doctors on this one. You had another comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to say a couple of things. First, as far as the ed versus med thing, I think it's really clear to point out that most of the research is done by universities in their medical fields. So I don't think it's this or that. I think that we just need to take it, review it, and decide what is best for our students. And I also wanted to say thank you to my board members for your comments. I know that we don't always agree on this topic, But I do respect all of your opinions, and I think you all have shared really valid points. And specifically, well, actually, all of you have made specific points tonight that really resonate with me. The music education, you know, TikTok, anecdotally, what's happening in our classrooms. These are all really real things that are happening and can't be dismissed, which is why I said that I do see a place for technology in education. I agree with Chair Ostafi that it doesn't necessarily need to be blanket. However, I really appreciate Anthony and the district's efforts to equalize technology across our district. I think that that's critical to how we approach technology. Right now, that it's a huge pain point in our community. Why does this school get this and this school doesn't? And we need to have standards. I think that that's vital to the work that we're doing, and so I really appreciate that work and the continued evaluation of technology and how it is benefiting our students and is it harming them. And I think, Anthony, you made a really fair point about consumption versus production. And when our teachers are using it for production and how to display learning, they're using it appropriately, they're using it effectively, but that isn't a standard necessarily across the district. Some teachers haven't bought into technology use and they don't know how to use it in their classrooms or they don't want to. And so that's where that professional development comes in, is how can we have all of our educators using it to promote learning in our classrooms. And that's where I'd like to see a tremendous focus in our district. So thank you.
And we've had a lot of comments on this side of the room. Does this side of the room want to make any final comments?
No, I would just echo that we really, for the public to know that this is just sort of the tip of all the conversation that has been ongoing in our work session. If you want to hear more about that, I would advise you to listen to it. And I do just really see some incredible uses of technology that are going to prepare our students for the future. And I even think about Skyping in at our STEAM, at our magnet schools, at our STEAM schools, and how you're accessing more knowledge through technology. So again, I think everybody's kind of said that, you know, we support the use of technology in the right cases, and I trust that that's what we're doing in this effort.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think that I very much trust our teachers. I don't believe they're just letting our students just be on their iPads for media use and whatnot, and it was really about you know, whether it's font type or being able to use it when you're, you know, you have a student with a lot of anxiety who needs to, you know, instrument test, you know, on their iPad and send it. I think that, you know, I'm looking at some notes I had just talking to some teachers. It offers the one-on-one devices offer background color change to help users read more easily. Devices allow students a read aloud option for text. Using online databases, one-to-one devices offer the ability for students to click on a word and learn immediate pronunciation and definition in real time while their learning continues. And I think we pile so much on our teachers that, I mean, this is a tool. It's not all day. It's a tool to help really our students at all different levels in their classroom. I mean, I think it's a great asset that we are very fortunate as a district to be able to have had the support of our community to provide this levy funding to advance.
Dr. Craig?
Ready to vote?
Okay, I think everyone's been clear. So all in favor of approving the capital expenditure budget for 2021, which includes the operating capital expenditure and the capital projects levy budget, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Motion passes 4-2. Thank you. Thank you, Ron, for that. Next up is the mid-year budget adjustments for fiscal year 2020. And that's with Ms. Benusa. Kelly?
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Ostafi, board members, and Superintendent McIntyre. The purpose of this evening's presentation is to provide information on the fiscal year 2020 mid-year budget revisions. At the June 18th, 2019 meeting, the school board approved the adopted budgets for all funds that we budget for. The first column on this slide shows the adopted budget for the General Operating Transportation Fund. The second column, highlighted in blue, are the mid-year budget adjustments for revenue and expenditures. The net change is a decrease to fund balance of $28,003. This is made up of an increase of 1.2% for revenues and 1.21% for expenditures. Overall, the net change is 0.005%, or 5/1,000ths of 1% of the combined revenue and expenditure budgets. The revenue budget changes are as follows. A $4.3 million increase in special education revenue. $3.3 million is an increase for fiscal year 2020, which includes a $2 million tuition transfer to federal grants, and $1 million for the 2019 prior year under accrual. A $2,226,000 decrease in general education for the impact of the state ed calculations resulting from revised pupil unit projections using the January 2020 student enrollment. A $728,000 increase for the new Safe Schools state aid one-time revenue, and $140,000 for the increase for the new foster care transportation for out-of-district placed students from Hennepin County. A $108,000 increase in non-public transportation, a $100,000 decrease in refunds, a $72,000 increase in other miscellaneous adjustments. Those amounts total the $3,023,000 net positive revenue adjustment. Next, the expenditure budget is being increased by $3,051,000 from the adopted budget. We analyzed the expenditures in 4 categories: salaries, employee benefits, purchase services, and supplies and other items. Salaries increased $8,650 for miscellaneous adjustments. Employee benefits increased $1.7 million for employer-paid health insurance premiums due to $1.7 million in state special education benefits being reclassified from federal to state funding. A $255,000 decrease in the HSA employer contributions based on plan selection of employees during open enrollment periods. A $110,000 increase in the retirement savings plan contributions due to increased participation. A $103,000 increase in FICA budget capacity, and $70,000 in miscellaneous items. This is a combined increase in employee benefits of $1.7 million from the adopted budget. Purchase services increased $710,000 for transportation costs for the Osseo Area Learning Center, hazard desegregation for Plainwood Steam Magnet School Transportation, and foster care for out-of-district placed students categories. This foster care transportation is offset by the $140,000 of new revenue from Hennepin County. There's a $200,000 decrease in tuition costs for post-secondary education, which is offset by decreased revenue. A $112,000 decrease in Intermediate District 287 tuition for area learning centers. A $100,000 increase for snow removal, and $30,000 of increase for miscellaneous adjustments. This is a combined increase in purchase services of $532,000 from the adopted budget. Supplies and other expenditures increased $536,000 in capital for safety and security, which is offset by the one-time revenue for Safe Schools state aid. $138,000 for the federal indirect chargeback rate decrease from 3.9% for fiscal year 2019 to 1.5% for fiscal year 2020. A $116,000 increase for miscellaneous adjustments for a net increase of $790,000. Overall, the expenditure adjustment is $3,051,000 more than the fiscal year 2020 adopted budget. This slide shows the baseline projection for future years. It includes the revised budget for fiscal year 2020. The projected 2023 through 2024 shows operational reductions of $7 and $8 million, which would be needed to maintain a minimum fund balance level of 5% if the base assumptions hold for the next 4 years. Next, we'll look at the tactic projections for future years. Tactic projections include revenue and expenditure tactics that are utilized to impact future projected years. Just like the base projection, it includes the revised budget for fiscal year 2020. The fund balance is projected at nearly $75.5 million and 29.55% of budgeted expenditures. It includes the revenue tactics for fiscal year 2021, which include a known tactic of a 2% increase to the basic formula allowance. Projections for fiscal year 2020 and 2024 include a revenue tactic of a 1% increase to the basic formula allowance for the first year of each of the next two bienniums. We adjust these assumptions for any changes after the legislative session ends. And the final tactic is the known levy adjustments for fiscal year 2021 of a negative $412,000. Expenditure tactics include the fiscal year 2021 through 2024, which show enrollment alignment adjustments, which is based on the 5-year enrollment projection, which was presented to the board at the December 2019 school board meeting. Fiscal year 2021 through 2024 show a reduction in expenditure trend from 3.75% to 3.25%, resulting in $1.3 to $1.4 million of reductions in projected annual expenditures. Fiscal year 2021 includes a known reduction for co-located services, which were previously funded through a grant. The fiscal year 2020 net mid-year adjustment reflects a decrease to fund balance of $854,000. By utilizing the known items and tactics for both revenue and expenditures, the projection for 2024 shows an operational reduction of $3 million would be needed to maintain a minimum fund balance level of 5%. The Food and Nutrition Service Fund revenue budget will be decreased by $228,000, and the expenditure budget will be decreased by $353,000, for a net decrease to fund balance of $125,000. Revenues are being decreased due to a decrease in lunch and breakfast program participation, and expenses are decreasing due to less food cost budget capacity needed. The Community Service Fund revenue budget will be increased $67,000, and the expenditure budget will be increased by $236,000 for a negative change of $169,000. Revenues are positively impacted mainly for facility rentals, and expenditures are increasing due to facility rental costs and adult and youth enrichment program growth. The capital expenditure land proceeds revenue budget will be decreased by $73,000, and the expenditure budget will be increased by $171,000 for a net decrease to fund balance of $244,000. Revenue is decreasing for the stated portion of operating capital and increased interest revenue. Expenditures are increasing for salaries and employer medical insurance and employee plan migration. The debt service revenue budget will be decreased by $3.8 million, and the expenditure budget will remain at the adopted amounts for a net negative change of $3.8 million. Revenues are being decreased for less anticipated tax collections than budgeted and increased interest revenue. The fund balance at June 30th is projected to be $3.4 million, or 14.54% of expenditures, and is more than sufficient. The last slide shows a summary of the net mid-year budget revisions in the 5 funds we budget for. And that concludes the presentation.
Thank you, Kelly. Let's start down at this end with Director Craig. Any questions?
No, thank you for your hard work as always. Thank you.
Director Dawson-Walton.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Simon.
No questions. Thanks for all the hard work.
Director Mosqueda-Jones.
Ditto.
I do not have any questions, but thank you for all.
Wait, I didn't ask you yet.
She looked at me.
All right.
I passed the ball.
No questions. So one of the things, I had a question on here, I couldn't let you go without that. This year, we have $3.3 million in revised calculations for the general operating transportation, a $2 million tuition transfer to federal grants, and $1 million for under accrual. So are those items one-time increases, if you will? And should we not continue to expect those?
This year is a unique year in that the special education formula is being transitioned to a new calculation for next year. And so we have a team here at the district that meets regularly. It's a combination of student services and business services staff, and we also include Minnesota Department of Education staff. And as we analyze the transition of the formula, those were adjustments we were making. The $3.3 million increase, that includes the $2 million addition of the tuition transfer. The $2 million tuition transfer will remain at that level. It may adjust in the future based on future conversations that we have. As far as the $1 million for the prior year under accrual, that has to do with the proration that was still on the 2019 amount when we closed our books, and then that went away with action that happened at the state. So that's a one-time item.
Okay. And we had a decrease in the general revenue because of fewer pupil units. So that looks like maybe 200 students, 150 students lower. Did we make any adjustments in our operating expenses due to fewer students? Because we've increased operating expenses when we know we were going to have more. Did we make any decreases here?
Sure. Our normal process is that we take the adjustment in revenue in the year the students present themselves to us, and that we adjust the following years for any adjustments up or down based on actual results, because we know that sometimes the way students are presenting at one point in time in our district are different than where we end the year, and so that's why there's a one-year delay on that.
Okay. So the questions I had currently. Any other follow-up questions? No? Thank you very much.
All right.
Appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you.
So, Board, is there a motion to approve the mid-year budget adjustments for fiscal year 2020 as just explained by Ms. Benusa?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor of approving the mid-year budget adjustments, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Thank you. Next action item is the recommendation for approval of the agreement on the terms and conditions of employment between the Independent School District 279 School Board and the Osseo Principals Association effective July 1, 2019 through June 30th, 2021. Mr. Miltier, you have the dais.
Great. Good evening, Chair Ostaffi, board members, and Superintendent McIntyre. On the agenda this evening for school board action is a recommendation for the approval of the terms and conditions of employment for principals effective July 1st, 2019 through June 30th, 2021. The principals group consists of 48 dedicated leaders in our elementary and secondary schools working with students, families, and staff to ensure a high-quality education for all. The new agreement contains language changes that reflect current district practices as well as initiatives to achieve our district mission and strategic objectives. School board members have reviewed changes and have had opportunities to ask questions and dialogue about the provisions, as well as consider the financial implications of those changes. Specific details are outlined in the memo attached to the board packet for tonight's meeting. It is the superintendent's and my recommendation that the school board approve the terms and conditions of employment for principals.
Board members, any questions of Mr. Miltier?
Thank you for your hard work.
Thank you.
All right, with that, is there a motion to approve the agreement on the terms and conditions of employment between ISD 279 School Board and the Osseo Principals Association, July 1st, 2019 through June 30th, 2021?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there any discussion? I want to thank you, and I want to thank the Principals Association for working hard to bring this together in a timely manner and something that is beneficial to everybody. So,
absolutely.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's 6-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your hard work. And the next action item is the recommendation to approve the 2020 legislative platform. Mr. Meyer.
Good evening again, Chair Ostaffi, Superintendent McIntyre, and school board members. Before you for approval this evening is Osseo Area Schools 2020 Legislative Platform. This platform document is a tool used to communicate to legislators and other stakeholders the priorities that have been identified to further the school district's mission. School board members reviewed the draft platform at the December 3rd, 2019 school board work session, and feedback from that meeting was integrated into this document. While the document is specific to our needs here at Osseo Area Schools, the items also align with other major educational groups including AMSD, MASBO, and MSBA.
So with that, administration recommends approval of the legislative platform as proposed.
Directors, any questions? With that, is there a motion to approve the 2020 legislative platform?
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Mr.
Director
Chair,
Craig?
I would just like to point out that this is probably one of the best legislative platforms that we've drawn up as a board. I really like it.
Good. It's tough. You want to be concise with legislators. And it's hard. We have a lot of needs. We have a lot of concerns. There's things, there's probably too many things in there to get across succinctly, but they're all things we need. There's probably more things in there that could be in there that we also need. But it's a good compromise of what we want to get done in the near term and what we want our legislators to focus on. So,
I think as we, continue our strategic process, and I'm always going back to our strategic process, but it's always, it's so fundamental that when we set that, everything else lines up behind it, the budget, the legislative priorities, everything that moves with that. So I'm looking forward to continuing to reset that cycle. And it is a challenge because I just looked at a whole bunch of the bill introductions, and I'm like, wow, I wish we had something in our legislative platform that said that we do or don't want that. So it is difficult, to your point, to get kind of conciseness, but also ahead of what we might be expecting to come. And even like the discussion on the standards that we had at the work session, how can we be influencing and leveraging our legislators to help communicate messages around what we, how we can be thinking about what we need and consider for the standards coming forward. So I think this has definitely got the detail behind our most important priorities that we're facing.
and I think you made a good point. Between the House and the Senate, there's, like 30 bills that have been introduced just in the last week. I would like to see no more mandates. It could be that simple. But there's a lot of things that are being proposed, and some that we support, some that we don't. So there's, I'd like all of our residents to pay attention to what's being proposed and how it may or may not be funded. So that's always something to take a look at.
Can I just throw in, I want to just thank Director Dawson Walton, Ron Meyer, and Valerie Dawson for their initial work on this. And as we've wrestled with this, it was starting with that basic foundation of the platform. So I wanted to acknowledge their hard work.
All right. Any final comments? No. With that, all in favor of approving the 2020 legislative platform, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Final action is the recommendation to graciously accept gifts to the district totaling $38,879.93. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. All in favor of approving, accepting the gifts, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Again, thank everybody for that. Final action item on the agenda tonight is adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned at 8:44, or yeah, somewhere around there. 8:42. Thank you.